Oh, hello and welcome to Really with Tom and Dave.
Nice placement of the merch.
Mm-hmm.
Merch. I like saying merch
because you like to purchase merchandise.
Yes.
Do you?
Yes.
Yep.
I want merchandise
from a merchandise exchange.
Yeah. Listen. I'll call it merch.
You can call it whatever you want.
Whatever you want me to call it. But that's our mug. And damn it, we're going to find a way to get you all mugs out there.
Yes.
We are here for your UAP infotainment.
Yes, and beverage consumption.
And beverage consumption is Dave and I are imbibing our various caffeinated beverages to make sure that you have the most energized podcast possible.
Yeah, in fact, let's just drink coffee for the next 20 minutes.
Let's just make Slurpee sounds. What's up, my friend?
Well, let's see. Well, it's what you mean on the general topic that we usually gather to talk about.
We could dive right in.
Yeah, not much. I mean, again, these things air a bit after we record them, but right now I'm preparing myself emotionally to pack my bags, to come west, to attend the Contact in the Desert event that we're going to be doing.
Come west, young man.
Yes, so we're doing that coming up next weekend, right?
I know. It's minutes away, it feels like.
Yeah. This coming weekend. It's
upon us. We have to do like a big show in front of a bunch of people, and that's a little bit more your speed than my speed, so I'm good and I'm nice and anxious about it.
Yes.
We got big guests.
Surrounded by all the luminaries of the UFO world.
Yes.
Like Whitley Strieber and Gary.
Oh my goodness.
Who else is going to be there?
Lots of people. Richard Dolan, George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell, who will be our guests.
Yes, George and Jeremy, our good friends, will be on our podcast that we'll be doing in front of a live audience.
It's just going to be standing room only.
And then
I want to see this show.
People like Travis Walton, I'm really hoping we'll get to meet when we're there, right?
Wow, I didn't know he was going to be there.
Yeah, there's a whole mess of people.
There's a whole mess of people. This is exciting. We're right in the thick of it.
Think about the people from the folks from podcast on the left. We're going to meet them. Our friend Earl Grey Anderson, who was on the podcast, will be there.
Yes.
And who else we got? But again, this is probably going to. Will this air before we go? I don't even know.
No, it won't. You're talking about the past right now.
All right. We will have been with Kelly Chase.
It went great.
King, a lot of great people.
It will not air before you go.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then there.
Look at that.
There we go.
The voice of God has spoken.
So we will have. So there. That was Chrissy there, correcting us or just setting us on a proper timeline.
Wouldn't be the first time.
So that will. So by the time you're seeing this, we'll have already been edified by all of these impressive people.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to have my mind blown.
Yes, and I think it's going to happen fairly regularly.
This association, yes.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
I'm more right now. I'm just in that paralyzed state of mind where I go, I have to take a number of my things and put it into a travel box.
Listen,
with wheels on it.
You don't know pain until you try to move my daughter out of her dorm room at her high school arts academy in 2 planes away, Michigan. Mm-hmm. That was a small slice of hell.
Yeah.
I am overjoyed to have her returned to our nest. She was sorely missed.
Mm-hmm. She's quite likable.
She's a very likable young lady. I just hear the pitter pat of little feet around the house now. I mean,
and a bizarre coincidence. She has the exact same birthday as our daughter Alina.
As the lovely Alina.
I mean, what were the odds that as friends we would have daughters born years apart but on the same day?
That itself could have some sort of UAP connection. I don't know what it is, but that's damn weird.
Yeah.
But they are. They share a birthday. I think they share some personality traits as well, some talents.
Yeah.
But there was about to be bloodshed as between my dear wife, my dear daughter, and myself trying to move her out. There was more shit, excuse the expression, in that small space. I mean, it was like 6 square feet of space and 14 tons of material was pulled out of that room. I believe there was some abuse of Amazon over the course of the year that I was not filled in on.
Mm-hmm.
There was this donation box that I suppose was supposed to be for, I don't know, the unhoused or something. But what was put in that donation box will not solve the homelessness crisis or put any. It was like Post-its and beads.
Yeah.
And like a purple wig.
Yeah. These are the essentials that the unhoused are in need of.
I was like, what?
Because they need to be able to put up a Post-it note to remind them where their purple wig is.
Yeah, there was more use. There was a lollipop. There was more useless shit. Like maybe the lollipop could come in handy to the people that don't have homes, but the rest of it did not qualify. It was just shit for me to sort. And I'm telling, it was one of those like 5 foot tall boxes, and it was just filled with that kind of nonsense. There was too much purchasing happening, and she was sent with too much stuff to begin with, and it all collided on me last Saturday. My back is not good, having been through this process. I'm still recovering. I did a lot of emotional eating in Michigan as a result.
I have a lot of sympathy for your experience.
Thank you.
Based on some experiences of my own.
Yes.
With my own.
Give them 2 pants, 2 shirts, 2 pants, maybe shoes. Send them on their way. That's what's happening next year. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I know. Well, I got home to find that, yes, Alina had usurped most of the storage in my apartment.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, forget it. Try finding a phone charger in my house right now.
Yeah.
It's like they ran from the house. There was multi phone we had more phone chargers than we knew what to do with, and they were all in their proper place. They have fled. It's as if they jumped in the woods and ran to another place, but they didn't. Yeah. They're somewhere. They're collecting in my daughter's room. But she's very entertaining. She's a very sweet child.
Yeah.
And pleasant. So there are good things too. I don't.
Well, I guess we should move on to something less frustrating than raising children.
I'm going to complain about this for 45 minutes. This is what people came to hear.
But we have an imminent to quote the title of the upcoming Lou Elizondo book.
Oh, look at you.
That's what his new book is going to be called, Imminent, which is a little worrying. But
yes.
We have with the imminent non-human takeover of our planet,
right?
And what the whole UFO world was startled by, or then I shouldn't say that. I'd say excited. I was going to say excited, but then I was realizing most of the UFO world is just sort of pissy about everything, no matter what.
Yeah, let's not be pissy today. Let's be excited.
It's a very positive development. Very positive development.
I have to be honest. After a very slow few months, where I was beginning to get concerned about the process of disclosure, and our I'm not going to call him our friend because I don't believe either one of us have met him. We shared space and oxygen with him at the Soul Conference or the Soul Foundation. But yes. Carl Nell is a very, very real deal fellow. Mm-hmm. This guy, I mean, he came out last week, I believe now, with a with a humdinger of an interview at the SALT conference. But
yep.
Let me just give you a little bit. He has Carl Nell is he's an executive. He is Ivy League graduate, War College alumni, fully joint qualified commissioned officer in the Army Reserve, commanded at every grade level through colonel, involving activation of the Army's newest expeditionary military intelligence brigade, Airborne Corps, JSOC.
You know what?
This guy, yes.
Yeah. Can I pause you for 1 second?
You may.
Why don't we let Carl Nell tell us all that?
Okay.
Because if we run that video, I think one of the first things Carl does is give his entire CV
of this year's SALT event.
And this is at the
And I'm very excited to
which is a
discuss
Wall Street
what I
organization
consider to be
about
one of the most consequential
planning for the future
questions
of the economy.
of our lifetime.
This is about planning for the future of the economy. Okay,
Yeah.
well,
in the universe.
weren't they in for a surprise?
I'm very
Yes,
lucky
and
to
Gary
have
Nolan was on this last year
Carl
and
Nell
made
here joining me for
pretty
this
explosive
conversation. Carl,
statements that
thank you
year,
so much
too.
for coming. And Anthony and AJ over at SALT, thank you so much for hosting this. So, Carl, maybe to begin, can you share a little bit about your background, who you are, and perhaps why people should care what you say?
Sure. Well, thanks, Alex. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. And it's a fantastic event. And I'm glad to see a large bunch of folks that stuck it out to the end for this talk. So I was fortunate. I had a 4-year ROTC scholarship to Penn. I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. The Army sent me overseas to do signal corps engineering projects. So I did a lot of strategic comm projects in Europe. I ended up working in Army Space Command. I commanded a satellite ground station, war trace to the Joint Chiefs. I spent some time at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The Army ultimately sent me to get a master's in mechanical engineering, a master's in strategic studies, graduate work in computer science. I was on track to stay in, but I decided that I wanted to pursue more of a technical career. So I got out and ended up working at Bell Labs, which was a fantastic place. Unfortunately, I was there during the trivestiture that folks may be familiar with, where the company got split up. I left Bell Labs and ended up working in Lockheed Missiles and Space. I worked at Northrop Grumman. I've ran strategic technology programs in the defense industry, worked for a lot of the 3-letter agencies, ultimately was a deputy chief of staff or deputy CTO for a $2 billion company. I was a vice president general manager of a Northern Virginia-based R&D firm. I stayed in the military, in the reserve. I commanded at every grade level through brigade. I was fortunate to stand up the Army's newest expeditionary MI brigade. I was the deputy chief of staff for a combatant command. Ultimately, this experience sort of combined to give me the opportunity to come in and advise Army Futures Command, the largest reorganization in the Army Reserve since really 1973, on how the Army could be more effective. And my last assignment was involved with the UAP task force, which maybe is the most apropos for this discussion.
And so, Carl, here's the $1 million question.
So
he doesn't know shit.
Just another crank with some hearsay. Yeah. That's pretty much a resume of a man who should know where every single UFO is at this point.
I mean, I just love the part where he's like worked for a lot of the 3-letter agencies, sort of glided over that part as well.
Yeah.
If you were writing a bad sci-fi, kind of like background, it would be this guy someone would be like, he can't, like, come on, like, get realistic. Like, he can't do all that shit. It's like, he's pick one.
Yeah. And I heard, but he's done some really mediocre open mic nights down at Yuck Yucks.
Yeah. But sold out karaoke.
So that's an amazing CV to be, and ending
I
with.
I also believe he was. Go ahead.
No, go on.
I said I think he was David Grush's superior officer.
Yeah, within the UAP task force, which for people who might not know, the UAP task force is not Arrow. It's not what was the
OSAP.
AIMSOG that came before it, or
AIMSOG. Jesus.
AIMSOG. The UAP task force was mandated by Congress after the 2017 New York Times article by Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal. So after that article came out, and Lou Elizondo became a public figure, and also David Fravor and Ryan Graves started giving testimony to people in Congress who were asking questions based on what they'd heard about ATIP. So Congress mandated that a UAP task force be set up to investigate this, and that was the one that Jay Stratton created for Congress, and that was how David Grush was assigned to do a 4-year investigation of possible UAP programs that are hidden in the sort of the dark money world of the military and intelligence. And Carl Nell was his. I think you're right. He was his superior in there, and he was also working for the UAP task force. So this was congressionally created.
Yeah, and which is telling. I mean, I probably don't need to remind our listenership that Grush came out of those 40 interviews utterly convinced that there was a decades-long reverse engineering program that had been hidden from the public that was being run by the CIA and various aerospace companies, and no one has really punched any holes in Grush's story. However, the recent Arrow report seemed to dampen some hopes that the government would do anything about disclosure and seem to be trying to pull a blue book. And this feels to me like a right cross, kind of,
That's the thing. I think we have to point out that Arrow, the lineage of Arrow, is because Congress set up the UAP task force, which really was the last kind of independent of the intelligence community and DOD community task force looking at UFOs. Because right after Congress set up the UAP task force, the Pentagon decided they would set up their own program, which became the AIMSOG program. Which then later morphed into, after they let everyone down, that morphed into Arrow, which, as you said, turned out to really just be a modern Project Blue Book debunking program and not an actual investigation program. In fact, they seem to go out of their way to avoid talking to anyone who would give them information about UFOs.
Seem to ignore them, and because this was a very clear and hilarious case of the fox guarding the henhouse, the Pentagon was going to investigate itself and figure out all the wrongdoing and secrecy that had gone on, and and then here we have Mr. Colonel Nell coming forward.
Yes, after a time when Sean Kirkpatrick, who left after leaving Arrow, decided he would slander all the members of Congress that were trying to get at the truth about UAPs, including people like, Chuck Schumer and Marco Rubio and Kristen Gillibrand and Tim Burchett and, Jared Moskowitz. So all these people who are trying to get to the bottom of UAPs and write legislation, basically, Sean Kirkpatrick came out and said, there's nothing to this and all of these people are crazy and they should know better and we shouldn't be trusting them. So and now we have Carl Nell.
Now we have Carl Nell. I don't know if we have it queued up, what his sort of what he sort of led with.
Yeah, well, I think if we start from here, I think we'll go right into it. Yeah.
And do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
And so, Carl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
And Carl, what evidence have you seen? What was the moment where you developed this level of conviction? Because what you're saying is extremely consequential and very important. And I know that a lot of people here, even perhaps, may not believe that statement.
Right. Well, probably a better way to ask that is, how can the folks in the audience come to a common understanding of what this phenomenon is? And so there's sort of two tracks here. One is from first principles, and another is actually from the data. So let's take a look at the data. So we can look at some folks that have very high level access to information, like Paul Hellyer, who is the defense chief for Canada, has come out and said the same thing. We can look at Ham Eshed, the head of Israel's, or former head of Israel's Space Force, has said the same thing. Chris Mellon, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intel, Sapco, has essentially said the same thing. Lou Elizondo has said the same thing. David Grush has said the same thing. David Grush cleared for presidentially level material. So you're looking at people that are in a position to know this, and they're telling you the same thing. You could take a look at the Gang of Eight in the Senate and in Congress. So there's two members of the Gang of Eight, Marco Rubio and Senator Chuck Schumer, that signed up to the UAP disclosure amendment last year that basically said they're not being told the truth and we need to push forward on that. So that's sort of an overview of some of the data. From a first principles standpoint, what's so unusual about this realization? There's billions of stars in the galaxy. Life here evolved in 500 million years, which is basically a blink of an eye. We've found planets around every star that we've looked at. It's likely that the universe is full of life. If you look at the SETI program in particular, the SETI program has all the same assumptions that you would accept and probably make with respect to this topic, except that they believe that non-human intelligence is transmitting signals here. But at the same time, like, we're not transmitting signals. SETI doesn't transmit signals, and the only signals that are actually broadcast of high enough power into space for somebody to pick up come from broadcast television and ballistic missile early warning systems, which you could argue our technology is moving away from. We're going to satellite, we're going to fiber. Broadcast TV is a thing of the past. And if you get to some state where society is stable, maybe we don't need ballistic missile early warning systems. So the other guy is probably not going to transmit. But what the other guy may do is come here if that's possible to do. And there's physics models that suggest that may be possible.
Okay, so there's a little bit to unpack there. I mean, the headline is zero doubt.
Zero doubt that non-human intelligence.
Zero doubt.
Yeah.
That's beyond a reasonable doubt. That's zero doubt.
Yeah.
And we know this guy has a tremendous experience at all the likely suspects. I mean, he's worked at Lockheed. He's worked for a bunch of three-letter agencies. We know he's a colonel. We know he was Grush's superior. We know he worked for the UAP task force, and we know he worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So,
yes,
I'm
the original Project Blue Book, and the place that, even if you believe the mogul balloon story, there's no argument that whatever the wreckage at Roswell was transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
So this is, I had to sit with this for a second. I mean, I'm sure you had the same response. I mean, this is and Carl Nell's talk at the Soul Foundation was kind of just as impressive and daunting in its scope and in its certainty. And we've discussed it. But now he's coming out into another sort of even more public setting and simply stating zero doubt that non-human intelligence is interacting with us, has been, and that there are unelected people in government who are aware of this fact, which is also interesting because it kind of now his data wasn't exactly the high point of that comment. Talk to me about that. What's your takeaway
well, I guess
there?
The argument he's drawing is that highly credentialed, highly informed people with high clearances all saying the same thing is data. I guess he's considering that as data that you kind of need to the credulity, the fulcrum of credulity shifts when you have all of these people basically all saying the same thing. And he even is going back a little bit in history to Paul Hellyer, who was basically informed a number of years ago now by U.S. intelligence that UFOs were real.
Yeah,
You
what's
know.
his back? I haven't really. I mean, I haven't
He was
really
like
heard
he
of
was like the
him.
Canadian version of Secretary of Defense.
Okay, that's significant, but he's
Yeah,
controversial. Why?
he's controversial because he came out and said UFOs are real. That's
Oh,
basically why he's controversial. Yeah, he was basically a very staid mainstream politician. Um, no scandals, nothing shocking, nothing untoward about his career. But then he came down here and he was informed of this, and he decided at a certain point that he was going to go public with it. And he started doing this a number of years back, and he died recently, I believe. Yeah. But Steve, you also have Jaime Shed, who there was only not too long ago the media world was all kind of snickering at Jaime Shed when he resigned as the head of the Israeli space program and Israeli space defense, and as a soldier and a longtime officer, and he came out and he announced that there was an intergalactic federation, and that the governments of the world were in contact with members of this intergalactic federation, and that there were bases and there were programs, and so
Wow.
basically he came out and said all of this. I'm trying to remember how many years ago now. 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I've lost track now.
I knew he had said that there were secrets kept. I didn't quite realize it had gone to those lengths.
Yeah. Which at the time, even at the time, I was going, well, I don't know. That's all. Sounds a little far fetched and a little crazy. But then, then you cut ahead, and you've got the David Grush's testimony, and you've got the testimony of all these pilots, and you've got what I heard from Lou Elizondo about recovery and reverse engineering programs, and now you go, well, a shed doesn't sound so weird and crazy.
Look, it's one of those sort of like the goalposts of our own belief, tend to move because certain things seem to become just understood and or accepted. I mean, I took it was a deflection, his answer, because I took if he had, I guess this was someone who was conscious of security clearances, I suppose, or not wanting him. I mean, the idea, he talks a lot about catastrophic disclosure. That was a big one. This whole idea that it's just going to spill out.
Yes,
what
he
is
a great
different?
Length at Saul, and he talks about it further down in this interview.
What isn't catastrophically? I mean, I guess what's the difference between saying there's zero doubt? What's his game here, Dave?
I'm a little confused by it. I mean, well, on one point I just go, yeah, I'm not an intelligence officer. I don't have any oaths with the government, but I do understand that that all the people that he named are all people who are telling us they have evidence. The evidence exists. It is real, but it's all confidential, and it's all tied up in classification. And that's why we needed the Chuck Schumer, Mike Rounds Disclosure Act, because we needed to get that. We needed to remove the classifications from the facts, from the documents. We know that the Grush is on the record as saying that he has given names, places, longitudes, latitudes of where the programs are, who's in charge of them, where the ships are.
And let's be clear, zero doubt. In order to have zero doubt, that hearsay is not zero doubt. What he's saying is, a very high-ranking people with high levels of security clearance are saying the same thing I'm saying, but that's not going to give one zero doubt. Zero doubt would be you've put your hands on the craft, like you have been in the room with the craft, or you have been shown irrefutable evidence and existence of this stuff, which that is my only takeaway, is that that's what he's implying, that he's seen it himself, because
And-
that otherwise
yeah.
some doubt would exist, because you can't just trust other people, that
Well, and it's-
seem credible.
And there's like terms of art and like in military and intelligence, when they're like briefing the president, they very rarely say without any doubt, zero
Of
doubt.
course, of
They
course.
say like high probability or high
Yes.
level of certainty,
Yes.
but they never say we know. Even like the mission to go in and get Osama bin Laden, they didn't say we know with certainty that he is in there.
Yes.
They had high levels of high confidence is usually I
Yes.
think the term that is used.
It would.
So when a
it's-
guy like that military with a military intelligence background says zero doubt, it is meaningful. And
right?
it also echoes Gary Nolan 1 year ago at this same conference when asked, how sure are you that that UAP are real? And he said, I'm 100% certain.
Now, I think he didn't quite walk that back, but he did acknowledge that he was being like a little provocative in saying that. This even seemed a few steps further along than that, just given his background, given his awareness of what that would mean. Now, I feel like there does seem to be an effort, because now Tim Gallaudet, who is a Navy, an admiral in the Navy, the essentially the officer who ran the weather, ran NOAA, had a few, I believe, aircraft carriers at his disposal, or he had fleets of ships under his command. This was a kind of serious fellow, and he also has come in to sort of backstop Carl Nell, saying himself that there is, absolutely zero doubt. This is a
and you also have James Lukatsky, like in his in the book Initial Findings with Colm Kelleher and George Knapp.
yes,
And when he was on the
Initial Revelations, yes,
yeah, and when he was on the Weaponized podcast with George and Jeremy, even they pumped him to try and push him further, but he came out and said flatly, we had that that in the program they had a UFO and they breached its hull.
Yes, I mean the wording was tortured, but that was the gist. The gist was they had a craft that did not have any apparent engine or exhaust
or fuel or flight surfaces, and that they got inside it, and that was as far as. But he said, without any doubt, we had the craft, and it was basically and then he described what could not be a human craft. So it echoes that too.
I don't know what the strategy is here. I guess it's just preparing the. I don't know if it's a message being sent to the government, if it's a message being sent to the forces, the Kirkpatrick-like forces that seem to just be disinformation agents. If this is going to just be sort of a war of reputations, because this guy's background eclipses Kirkpatrick's background. I mean, the sort of level of authority that Carl Nell has had, the breadth of, he covers the entire conspiratorial spectrum.
Yes, both in government and out of government, and working for third parties. He covers it all, and he's making the statement again at a Wall Street organization. This is like a Wall Street sort of think tank. I guess SALT was started by Anthony Scaramucci, I believe, which is a weird fact.
Okay.
So the Mooch started this.
The Mooch.
But the people in the audience are Wall Street types. These are people who I guess we could say have the loudest votes in America.
Uh-huh.
Because
I guess if you get the money folks on board, then that's a strategy. That's an interesting place to start.
If you have a lot of moneyed people and investment types, and perhaps, and they start thinking, wait a minute, I've been locked out of this. I've been locked out of this technology that might be worth billions and billions or trillions of dollars. Right. That might inspire some interest from those people if they start to believe it's true, and they may lobby behind the scenes.
I think that is reasonable to assume, because I would say the popular, the non-finance people, the rest of us, the public, is kind of on board with this idea. It's simply that the media, the kind of mainstream dinosaur media, continues to sort of play ball along with the
intelligence and DoD,
the intelligence agencies, and it's such a consolidated media at this point. You could argue it's about 7 human beings that really are kind of in charge, and that sounds so classic conspiracy, but it's just true. Work in media. We work in media. We have seen, I can attest that, presidents of networks or studio, like there are tiers and tiers, like everything has been so kind of bought up and gobbled that there is no conspiracy here. The fact of the matter is, studios and networks don't kind of exist on their own anymore.
Go to your Disney Plus app, and you'll see the results of.
They're all simply piled on top of each other.
Of deregulation.
Yeah, and so the media monopolies are a real thing. Decision making is
vertical integration, which was expressly outlawed back in the old days under antitrust laws.
Yeah, So synergy has resulted in the layer cake of media that now essentially encompasses about 7 or 8.
Synergy is the modern term for corrupt monopoly.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, completely. So that's a real thing. That's not a conspiracy. That's just a reality that we all exist in. Is that, and so it's a money making thing, but it's definitely a communication control method. If you want to go there, but it doesn't take many people to convince to toe a certain line or to make sure that this UAP stuff. So it's interesting that this idea that he would, that this would be voiced, zero doubt, very, high-ranking guy with just scads of intelligence, military, corporate, aerospace experience, is saying there is zero doubt non-human intelligence has been interacting with us for a long time, and that
non-elected members of the government are aware of it.
These are weird days. I don't, it just feels this feels new to me. I mean, I guess the tides of our kind of ADD culture will just kind of recede and go away.
Well, it feels like it has gotten, to my knowledge, it has gotten no coverage in any of the. The New York. I don't think it's had any coverage in the New York Times or the Post.
CNN has to cover Trump's, the porn trial for Trump. There's no possible room for this kind of information, which would at least be curious. The curiosity of like, is this former Air Force colonel crazy, or did something just slip out at the SALT conference? I mean, you would think a reasonable news editor would, news director would.
And who are these people that have indoctrinated some of the most high-ranking people in the Senate and in the House of Representatives? Who is it that has indoctrinated all these people into a cult?
Well, I'm getting concerned. I'm concerned. It's like it is. I mean, what the hell? Are they all? I don't. This zero doubt, really? Just a game of telephone gives you zero doubt that this feels like a concerted, very purposeful. Very, and he knew exactly what he was going to say and how he was going to say it and who he was going to say it to and why.
And again, the people who love to shout hearsay, again, it's there's a very large difference between hearsay and having knowledge gleaned from a multi-year investigation from intelligence officers. That's not hearsay. That is conclusions of an investigation. Hearsay, yeah, so people in the media, oddly enough, who report on things like actual hearsay and who watch, know better, will keep bringing up the term hearsay, and it's our third, no firsthand information.
Now, listen, I will say in defense of the doubters, it's like how many high-ranking people can come in and say there's like absolutely no doubt this is happening. I mean, it's a little bit of a weird tug of war. I do believe that in order to advance the ball, as much as I do think, Carl Nell is one of the most credible, high-ranking people to come forward in our modern times with this declaration, it still leaves this chasm of verifiable proof. We're forced to sort of take somebody's word for it. Now,
we would, but if Representative Turner from over at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, if he hadn't gutted the Schumer Act, the Schumer Amendment, without any real argument for gutting it, we might be getting close to that information becoming public. So if all this information doesn't exist, why go to such lengths to stop it from coming out?
Right. Well. Also, I do believe it sounds like they're kicking back into high gear to try to take another whack at the UAP.
I think they're rewriting the legislation now. Yeah.
Which is promising. So it's things are moving. We don't quite. Yeah. I'm very. We got to drag somebody on the show and find out what's going on behind the curtain here, because there really does seem to be this kind of war going on between people that want to sort of just throw a bunch of blue book glitter into the air and let the public move on, and high-ranking folks, really some of the most credible folks that are in this movement, if you want to call it, or the UAP world realm, are putting their reputations on the line to say unequivocally, this is our reality that we're in. Mm-hmm. And he said some pretty provocative stuff. I don't know if we want to
roll a little. Yeah, do you want to roll a little more and get his?
And you've referenced other people that have said the same thing that also have similar credibility. There's similar reasons for why we should believe many of these folks, yet the government itself has not formally disclosed. They've been very reluctant to do that. Why? Why do you think that is?
So there's 6 basic reasons, and this, again, you could draw this out from first principles. There's a national security reason. There's the lack of a plan. There's the potential for societal disruption. There's the possibility that there's some non-public agreement. There's the potential for misdeeds and the desire to cover up misdeeds. And there's just the basic organizational intransigence and lack of priority that might be associated with the topic. So all these things are factors. The issue is that really the national security issue subsumes all the others. And so there's an opportunity maybe to contract the national security issue, similarly to what was done with nuclear weapons and nuclear energy, such that nuclear energy is not necessarily classified and is available to the public. But lack of a plan and the potential for societal disruption are key ingredients that would prevent any responsible leader from coming forward with information that they don't have the means to address in a responsible way. It would be irresponsible to do that.
Okay, so what you're saying is that you have absolute conviction that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet, that there are factions within our own government that know about this, yet we still don't have a plan, and they may represent a security issue. This may pose a threat to humans, yet you still believe that we should disclose. Is that right?
Correct, right. So there's really 3 reasons that trump all those others. And those others are basically valid, like I said. So the first issue is the moral right. the government exists for and by the people. And so the nature of reality is fundamentally not government information. People have a right to know the world in which we live, and the pursuit of happiness requires that knowledge. So that's sort of the first kind of overarching philosophical foundation for this. But, as a corollary to that, if there are misdeeds that were done, then they need to be remediated. If there's lack of proper oversight, which is suggested by some of the whistleblowers, that needs to be remediated. So the first issue is the moral issue. The second issue is being in a reactive mode is never preferable to being in a proactive mode. So reactive mode is basically trying to prevent disclosure. But failing that, you might get a situation where you have catastrophic disclosure that creates all the problems that you were trying to prevent. So a more balanced middle path of controlled disclosure is the best way to do this, which is, again, an argument for some amount of disclosure. And the third part is simply societal advance and global competitiveness. More brain trust needs to be brought into this topic in order to make progress and to improve society. And so all three of those things together trump the 6 other reasons for non-disclosure.
And can we pause it for a second? Mm-hmm. I just one of my takeaways when I watched this, which was beyond that, which was also zero doubt, is that this guy has been professionally working on this topic for a very long time at an extremely high level. Like this is all kind of, jargon in programs. This has been debated internally at these high level places, and the whys and wherefores. These 6 things, like he's not just this isn't just popping off. These are clear military considerations, and these things get listed, and he's sympathetic to the problems that will arise, and clearly there's been a decision made at some level by some people that these other issues trump those issues. And so we're talking about the author, or at least key author, of Schumer's amendment, the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023. And there is just an undeniable institutional authority with which he's speaking about this issue that does, to me, really kind of separate it from the pack. I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, definitely the level of detail in the Schumer amendment as it was originally written. It's pretty clear that Carl Nell had a great deal to do with the drafting of that legislation.
Yeah, and so I like,
and that it's so bespoke to the data that he has, that the Gang of 8 has, that people like Lizondo and Chris Mellon have, that David Grush has, all that. They have the data, they have the info, and that legislation was clearly built around that information.
And it was built to do exactly what he's talking about, which is controlled disclosure to, ameliorate the panic and chaos of just somebody just rolling the ship out and being like, here it is, or the Russians doing it, or the Chinese doing it. And it speaks to the only other point I'll make is that when we were at Sol, which was different from any other kind of conference or anything that we've experienced, was this attitude that the reality of reverse engineering programs was completely in the rearview mirror of the conversation. It was a complete given that there was debris and stuff has been studied, and that there are these programs, and the entire almost total conversation was about what are we going to do about it? How do we contend with the fallout of disclosure? And that was so jarring about it. And here he is sort of continuing and to me, participating in what must be some sort of pre-planned orchestration of what controlled disclosure would look like.
Yeah. I also loved your jolt when you mentioned, was it like government agreements?
He snuck that in number 3 or 4 of the 6,
which takes us back to Jaime Shed.
It really does. I mean,
and also
agreements.
David Grush in his testimony, in his interview with the debrief, and with and with News Nation, he brought up as a question. He said, have there been government agreements with non-human, intelligence?
We're
And
living in a 1950s science fiction movie.
yeah, and again, that's how intelligence people talk when there's something they can't tell you, but they want you to think about it because they want you to know that it's true. Like it's what Lou Elizondo does in interviews all the time, where he does that. Well, imagine a world in which, is how he presents things that he's not allowed to say.
I don't like the agreements thing. I don't know. I just don't.
I know. And again, we were all just told,
creepy.
A couple of years ago, Hamish Ed was just this. Oh, yeah, he was a great guy until he retired and immediately became senile and crazy.
Yeah, one wonders, these people that have been privy to these secrets all their life, near the end of their lives, how they might want to, share a little honesty with everyone, or not, or but they're easily dismissed.
Well, there's certainly a lot of deathbed confessions in the lore of UFOs.
Yeah, there sure are. So I just found his the preparedness of his statements, the clear the fine tuning of the language,
rationality of it.
Yeah. No, the total kind of military language. The language is so concise and clear. This has been really debated at high levels and discussed, and this seems to be part of what one would call controlled disclosure. Mm-hmm. Should we play a little more?
Sure.
It happens.
I feel like we're on Mystery Science Theater.
If we don't disclose. I know you mentioned this idea of catastrophic disclosure. Maybe disclosure may be forced upon us. How do you think about that?
So the situation is usually thought of as a binary state. It's like an all or nothing. And people have sort of argued this. But anybody paying attention realizes the government has already indicated that unidentified anomalous phenomena are real. They're not ours, and they're not our adversaries. The Pentagon has said that. Like, for people that are paying attention, like, that shoe already dropped. So for a lot of people, they think that the second shoe to drop is this is non-human intelligence, and maybe the conversation stops there. Like, the president comes out and says, there's non-human intelligence. The truth is that will precipitate this crescendo of other questions that maybe the government's not ready to answer, that will court, if not precipitate, potential negative ramification for society. And so as an example of this, I would actually point to something from the ancient past, the Bronze Age collapse. So Eric Klein, Princeton University, 2015, wrote a very interesting book called 1177 BC, the year that civilization failed. And so this is well known to current scholarship. Within a single lifetime, all of the very effective ancient civilizations of the Bronze Age failed due to a confluence of reasons that are not necessarily fully understood today. So we're talking about Egypt, the Hittite Empire, the Minoan Empire, the Manasseh Empire, the Babylonian Empire. All these civilizations failed, never to return, other than, let's say, Egypt. And so these were highly sophisticated civilizations with highly developed infrastructures, highly developed administrative states. They were globalist, in a sense, very similar to today. In terms of the known world, the known Near East, they were economically interdependent. They had both diplomatic ties and commerce ties. And yet these civilizations failed in a single lifetime because of stressors that these civilizations collectively could not address within the time frame. And so if we look at our society today, one might argue that it's similarly fractured, similarly under economic stress, similarly under cultural stress as well, fractured and fragile diplomatic situation. It mirrors very much this scenario.
Yeah.
And so for a responsible decision maker, that is certainly a factor.
And so I guess when you say that, are you implying that perhaps we as a society may not be ready for disclosure? Or are you saying that we may not be able to defend ourselves against this other force?
So there's sort of different viewpoints on whether people are ready to deal with this phenomenon. And, popular culture is kind of infused with this stuff. Roswell became a meme a long time ago. We got programs on ancient aliens, Skinwalker Ranch, all this stuff. I guess I would draw an analogy, though, for people that believe in a certain faith tradition, whatever that faith tradition is, and hold to that and subscribe to that in a very serious and devout way. And sort of pose the question, even for folks of that ilk, and I would count myself as one, if you're confronted with the reality of your religious belief system, like the reality of the metaphysical, an angel, a messenger from God, what have you, that's going to be a sea state change in your way of dealing with reality, right? Even though you already believe it, right? So it's one thing to believe and it's another to know. And I think in this context, this phenomena has the potential for an analogous effect both on the individual and on society.
Yeah, but do you think that the phenomena, this non-human form of intelligence, represents a threat to humanity?
So this is a good question too, and some of the other folks have sort of framed things in that light. And I guess I would suggest that if the universe is governed by conservation laws, and it's probably reasonable to assume the laws of nature that we understand apply everywhere. We may have incomplete understanding, undoubtedly we do, of these laws, but they're sort of homogeneous and they apply throughout the universe. And so those laws are governed by conservation rules. There's conserved quantities. And so this reality really forces a Darwinian type competition in order to survive. And so it's reasonable to assume any other civilization that's evolved has come up through the same Darwinian evolutionary process. So I think it's naive to expect complete altruism until and unless you get to a state of post-scarcity, where you essentially have no physical needs that we're kind of encumbered with in this universe. And so in some sense, it's the economics of the future that are going to determine whether there's cooperation, competition, or some kind of symbiosis, and inform the intention. But to assume either malintent or
can we pause
altruism,
it there?
I think is
I don't know. There's a lot there too.
Yeah.
Carl Nell appears to, hedging again, except to suggest that Darwinian biology, exists throughout the universe. No matter how complicated these life forms get, there's going to be a fight for resources, which to me was communicating that this could be a little threatening to us.
Yeah. Well, the notion that, and because again, a lot of people do have a bit of a utopian view of UFOs and aliens. They think that clearly they're here to help us.
Yes.
And, and I feel, I kind of agree with Carl. I don't think there's any reason to assume that, considering all the horrors of humanity, if they were seriously here to help us, they're doing a dreadful job.
Although personally, in my own personal finances, I do yearn for a post-scarcity future.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty good to me. But
I would love that too.
It sounds like there might not be a lot of post-scarcity life forms out there. He didn't seem to think that whatever we're dealing with,
we can hope that whatever's here is. But there's also the notion that he points out is that, like for a lot of people who say, "Oh, just tell us. We already believe UFOs are real. It's not gonna fuck us up if you just tell us." And he's sort of saying, well, even though you think you're prepared for it, it's as he said, like if you're a devoutly religious person who believes angels exist, that's a very different mindset than having an angel appear in your living room and start telling you stuff.
100%. That was what he was saying. He was like, even those of great faith, he considers himself somebody who's, that shit gets real quick. When and might alter your perception of these things if the metaphysical is in fact physical, or if
tomorrow we have to live in a world where we are dealing directly with non-human intelligences, even as much as I believe that it's there, that they're here and they are interacting. As much as I believe that, if we're as a society, as a species, we're living that head on at some point. That will feel very different.
Oh, it'll feel. I mean, yeah, it's going to be very,
Yeah,
very different and catch most of us by complete shock
yeah,
and surprise. And
yeah. Because
you
I
know,
still have a part of my brain that still goes, well, maybe not.
oh no,
You
I
know,
trust me. I mean, half the time in our conversation, I'm trying to go. Well, maybe it is some sort of weird intelligence military cult that's convinced of this, and we're, I mean, the alone in the universe, in this far corner of the universe, of this far corner of the galaxy, that we're in. It's still, I mean, it's a little bit safer just because it's what we know.
hmm
This idea that we're this kind of special little bubble of conscious life, alone, even though there's this absurd amount of real estate all around us that we know nothing about.
hmm
This idea that it's just barren, just a desert is kind of absurd, but I guess it makes us feel a little more comfortable than this idea that a much more advanced, invisible, ecosystem is just at work all around us, and we're not able to see it. That's
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that's
that's also,
puzzling.
well, we like to comfort ourselves. I mean, we try to find uniqueness about what it is to be human, and that keeps getting blown out of the water, even just on our planet by our own, you know, uh, pe- the study of animals. I mean, Jane Goodall kind of, you know, man used to be man the tool user until Jane Goodall saw chimpanzees building and using tools, and then suddenly we had to redefine what humanity was.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and we're or we define ourselves as the only ones with language. Now we're finding out, well, no, humpbacks seem to have a pretty complex language with grammar. Um, you know,
didn't somebody discover recently orangutans are using fishing poles?
yeah, and also orangutans are using herbal remedies on wounds. They're preparing and using using medicine
Yeah,
when they're
it's
wounded.
thrilling and terrifying to think that we could be in a generation that experiences this level of kind
Yeah,
of culture. Not cultural. What's the term? What's the term of choice in UAP circles? What sort of shock?
ontological.
Ontological shock. That
Thank you, John Mack.
yes, that I struggle to find a comparison in the past 2,000 years. That if this, as it feels like these seams are splitting, wow, to live through
Yeah,
this will be really quite interesting.
yeah. I mean, I think the only comparable shift was this shift, shift towards a Copernican solar system. You know,
Yeah, and I guess I would have to amend what I just said, because obviously cultures and people in our on our planet have definitely experienced ontological shock when other so-called advanced societies kind of rolled up on their shores and began
yeah.
spreading disease and blowing them away.
Ask the Aztec nation if you. Oh, you can't.
Yeah, you can't, and they really, that is probably one of the kind of best examples of I mean, there's probably there's several, as we know, and they all end sadly. But so we as human beings in various groups have definitely experienced this level of ontological shock and seen our gods, so-called gods, arrive and really didn't have any altruistic intentions at all. They just wanted to take some resources and go. So it's unfortunately that
Yeah,
may not be exclusive to Earth.
yeah. I mean, we can hope that it is. We can hope that whatever has the intelligence to get here uh, has survived long enough to to not have our brutality and our greed and our lack of empathy as a species.
Fingers crossed for post scarcity.
Yeah, but again, as Carl Nell points out, it's naive to assume it. And and also there's that worry when he says that maybe he has info that might lean towards the other end of that
Totally
spectrum.
suggest that. Should we play a little more and then
Sure.
we'll
Yeah.
wrap up
We're
our
almost
Carl
close.
discussion?
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is it's impossible to know the true intentions of a higher intelligence. We may be competing for the same scarce resources. We may not be, right? We may be almost irrelevant to them, and they may be acting altruistically, although we cannot safely assume that. And so I guess I'm curious, if we continue down this disclosure path, do you believe that disclosure is inevitable?
So again, people that sort of look at this topic and study it, and there have been some good examinations on this from a historical standpoint, have realized that we're not in really a new state. Like this sort of disclosure emphasis has come and gone over time. And so this is not the first time we've arrived at this stage. I would suggest that maybe the peak of this current cycle happened last December with the Schumer amendment, and then it got rolled back, it was defeated in the House. And so it remains to be seen, if the process is going to continue. One hopes and can maybe draw a little bit of confidence that maybe this will come around is the colloquy that Senator Schumer and Senator Rounds had back in December. After their amendment got killed, they basically went on the Senate floor and articulated their rationale for the legislation. And I think Senator Schumer, to quote him, almost said it was a travesty that this did not pass. So this is, a bipartisan colloquy on a topic that I guess most people would probably consider fringe, and yet these two senators felt the need to do that and to double down on their desire to see this through.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll see maybe a reintroduction of some version of that this summer with the goal of maybe putting it into the NDAA by the end of the year.
Do you think that it's imperative that the United States leads on the disclosure efforts?
So this is an interesting question too, because this is a global phenomenon and it's affecting other countries just like the United States. The reporting on this is clear over decades. Other countries have reported this stuff. And not only that, the Vatican
can we pause it a second? There's
and,
one thing that I think we should. I just read just today. Japan has is putting together a high level, like lawmakers in Japan are putting together a high level UAP task force themselves.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it government mandated. I assume along the same lines of what we're up to, and they of course have long history. There was Fukushima. They had tons of sightings. They have a very interesting attitude towards UAP, which is a little bit more, I think, leans towards the altruistic, or at least an acceptance, less fear involved. But I thought that was a kind of interesting development. One of our allies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is interesting. So we may get outstripped by other countries of it.
Well, it's going to be. I mean, it will be fascinating to see how. I mean, particularly China deals with this. One has to assume they'll, have a different attitude towards this. I mean, I just don't know what.
Yeah.
What,
I think we can count on Canada to drag its heels. I think I can. As a citizen of Canada, I think I can guarantee
speak to
that.
them. If you can get us a little, get some motivation there, that would be helpful. Is there anything that the Colonel spoke about that did you want to listen to a little bit more to just wrap up, or how do you?
Sure. What do you think? I was trying to think if there was anything else in that section.
I think. Where he sits right now is like I still am curious about the strategy here. My sense is that he's trying to back up his guy David Grush.
Mm-hmm.
I think what it does is it reinforces the credibility of David Grush and what he came forth with last year, because some people have tried to sort of besmirch and smear him and whatnot. So now you have Carl Nell and Tim Gallaudet, who are arguably two of the most foremost out there, experienced, highest level government officials to sort of speak. Yeah. And they both are saying zero doubt absolutely happening.
Mm-hmm.
No question about it. And that is something else.
I think he's also trying to get the wind at the back of Schumer and Rounds, because I think he's quite right. Like that, the fact that they wrote the legislation was remarkable. The fact that they then went together to the floor of the Senate and defended the legislation they wrote, condemned the defeat of it in the House. That and again, the fact that it got no public response is remarkable. And I think maybe part of what he's doing here is drawing attention to these remarkable political developments that have meaning.
Yeah, they do have meaning. Now remember that the UFO folk were just as responsible for that. They did not want eminent domain. There was some, the Skinwalker Ranch folks, Brandon Fugel, who has deep pockets himself. They were really against it. Jacques Vallée. There were a lot of folks that were not fans of certain aspects of this legislation, probably because there was a whiff of we're the government, we'll handle it kind of thing.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of bad history of eminent domain. If you're a fan of the Los Angeles Dodgers, if you go to ball games there, you're benefiting from some very dark moments in eminent domain.
I didn't know this, even as a resident of Los Angeles.
Chavez Ravine was basically stolen from the Mexican community that lived there and had whole neighborhoods that were just wiped out in order to build Dodger Stadium.
I am not a fan of Dodger Stadium or the Dodgers for that matter.
But then on the other hand, there were dark periods in the building of the transcontinental highway system, interstate highway system in the U.S.
Yes, a terrible legacy of just the government grabbing shit that it wants, and so
sometimes for good ends, because the highway system was definitely necessary. But the also thing is eminent domain has provisions in it that the government is supposed to pay fair market value for all the properties it seizes. So then again, when you're dealing with crash flying saucer, how do you determine fair market value?
I don't know how you determine fair market value. I don't know. That's a tough one. And I recall some interesting back and forth debate at the Saul Foundation when Carl Nell was giving his presentation about eminent domain and some of the questions that people had, like Jacques Vallée, who clearly had items that he did not want taken from him. Yeah,
and Carl Nell at the time said, well, you would maintain intellectual property rights over anything you developed based on these materials. You would maintain your rights to the whatever you've developed. But you would have to relinquish ownership of the actual materials.
These are weird days, Dave.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I thought this was a good runway into what will be our Contact in the Desert experience. Gives us plenty to talk about with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp. And I think this speaks to what could be a very interesting summer of creeping disclosure.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It'll be interesting. Yeah. And as I said, I've been hearing, as I said, when we all thought things were slowing down, I keep hearing from people that I have faith in that things were coming. And I think, maybe this is the start of it.
Yes. There have been murmurings, apparently. Yep. So all right, rock and roll. Lots to talk about then.
All right. And we'll stand by for Lou Elizondo's book release in August, I think. It's coming out in August.
Get him on the show.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I've been messaging.
All right. That's exciting.
Yep.
All right, buddy.
All right. Good to see you.
Good to see you. This was cool. I'll see you in a few days and in person and rock and roll.
All right. See you in Indian Wells.
Thanks, really, folks. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.